"You can't grow food here. This isn't some country bumpkin neighborhood," snapped a voice, sharp enough to slice through the hum of bees around my tomato plants. And I looked up to see Alina Whitfield, arms crossed, designer sunglasses perched like a crown, her face puckered with disdain. I wiped dirt from my hands, standing calmly from my garden bed, and replied, "Actually, I can. This land. Been a farm for over 50 years. My voice steady despite the knot forming in my gut as I met the HOA president of Maple Creek Estates for the first time. I'd bought these 5 acres 6 months ago, pouring 30 years of teaching savings into my retirement dream. Organic vegetables, a roadside stand, a quiet life on soil so rich it practically sang. But Alina's red-faced glare told me she saw my paradise as her personal hell. "Your farm violates 6 community guidelines," she spat, the word dripping with venom. "And I'm here to enforce them. Expect a notice soon," before stomping off in her pristine white shoes, leaving me shaking my head over my peppers. That night, I spread my property papers across the kitchen table, the deed glowing under the lamplight, clearly marking my land as agriculturally zoned, outside HOA boundaries, a fact etched in county records since before Maple Creek's manicured lawns existed. I snapped photos of every page, a precaution born from whispers I'd heard about power-hungry HOAs, and 3 days later, an official-looking envelope slapped against my door. 14 days to rip out my crops or face $100 daily fines for unapproved landscaping and aesthetic violations. I called the county records office, heart-pounding, and the clerk's voice was a lifeline. "Mr. Davis, your land's agricultural. HOA has no say. I'll send certified docs," flooding me with relief as I drafted a polite rebuttal, attaching zoning maps and hand-delivering it to their office, keeping copies like armor. A week crawled by without a peep, and I was harvesting bell peppers when Jeff, my neighbor down the road, leaned on my fence, saying, "Alina, got it out for you, called your place an eyesore farm at the HOA meeting, wants to stop others from copying you," his warning tightening that knot again. Jeff's heads-up proved prophetic. 2 days later, my cameras, installed after his nudge despite the cost, caught 3 HOA polo-shirted figures trespassing while I was at the farmer's market. Alina leading them, yanking up carrot tops and snapping photos, leaving my crops baking in the sun. I got home to find the damage, fury bubbling as I printed stills from the footage, adding them to my growing file, only to wake the next morning to another notice. My farm now a public nuisance. Fines jacked to $250 a day, retroactive, Alina's handwritten scrawl taunting. "Perhaps now you'll take us seriously." I called my lawyer friend Sarah, who growled, "Don't pay a dime. They're bluffing. Send another letter, certified, and post no trespassing signs. They've already broken the law stepping on your land." I followed her advice, staking signs that afternoon, mailing a firm demand to cease harassment, and for 3 days silence held, until machinery roared at dawn, and I bolted outside in pajamas to find 2 landscapers with weed trimmers eyeing my tomatoes, waving Alina's signed work order, claiming HOA cleanup rights, only backing off when I threatened liability for crop damage, my camera snapping their retreat as I dialed Sarah again, knowing this was war now. The landscaper's retreat felt like a fleeting win, but Alina Whitfield wasn't done. 2 days later, my phone's security app jolted me from a supply run, live footage showing her and 5 HOA cronies in matching polos plucking my tomatoes, filling baskets with peppers, cucumbers, and my prized heirlooms worth $6 each at the market. I yelled into the call to Sarah, "They're stealing my crops. I'm 15 minutes away." And she barked, "Don't confront them alone. Call the police now." As my shaking hands dialed 911, reporting theft in progress, my truck roaring home to find Alina directing her crew toward more plants, 6 baskets overflowing with hundreds of dollars of my labor. I leapt out, shouting, "Stop right there. What do you think you're doing?" And she turned, smug as ever, saying, "We assumed this was going to waste since you won't maintain it properly, helping ourselves to what you don't value." While Thomas Jenkins, the HOA treasurer, bit into a purple Cherokee tomato, juice dribbling down his chin like a taunt. "This is private property. You're trespassing and stealing. I've called the police," I snapped, pointing to my no trespassing signs, but Alina laughed. We're the HOA, we enforce standards. This eyesore needs to go. And Thomas added, documents can be changed. We've talked to the county about rezoning. A gut punch that left me reeling. I filmed them with my phone, their brazen theft unfolding as Alina sneered. It's just vegetables, not worth anything. Blind to the thousands they meant to my livelihood, her parting shot a chilling, comply or things get worse, as they sauntered off with my produce. Officer Martinez arrived just then, eyeing the scene, baskets abandoned as the HOA crew hit the road, and I explained. They stole my crops, I've got footage, while Alina called back. We were removing unhealthy plants, a routine inspection. Eli Martinez met with a frown, asking for my documents, which I fetched, proving my farm's agricultural zoning outside their reach. Sarah pulled up, announcing, I'm his attorney, return the stolen goods and leave or face charges. And though Alina bristled, Martinez ruled. This land's not HOA, put the vegetables back and go, forcing their retreat, her hiss of this isn't over lingering as they dumped the baskets. Martinez took my statement and footage, muttering, this HOA's notorious for overreach. This is new, though. The DA will decide on charges, leaving me with Sarah to assess the wreckage, trampled plants, broken stems, at least $2,000 lost, not counting future yields. We need to hit back hard, she said. I'll file for a restraining order today, but they're escalating. Rezoning talk means a long game. We've got to outmaneuver them. And I nodded, emailing the county zoning board that night for any pending applications, then calling the local paper, pitching. The HOA's harassing a legal farm with theft. I've got video. The editor bit, sending a reporter next day, but morning brought another notice. My farm a biological hazard with $5,500 daily fines, and an email from the county confirming a rezoning request including my land, filed by Thomas Jenkins, public comment in 30 days. Jenny Kim, the reporter, arrived as I processed this, filming the damage, gasping at the theft footage. They just took it. And I said, they think they're above the law. Her sharp questions digging into a story that was about to blow wide open, Alina's next move already brewing. Jenny Kim's visit lit a spark. Her camera rolled as I showed the trampled crops and played the footage of Alina Whitfield and her HOA posse looting my farm, her sharp intake of breath fueling my resolve as she said, this is brazen. They think they're untouchable. I fortified my defenses that night. Better fencing, floodlights, a hidden trail camera, sleep fractured by every rustle. But the county's rezoning email and that biological hazard, notice, with its $5,500 daily fines, kept me wired. Alina's escalation a neon sign she wasn't bluffing about forcing me out. Sarah called with news. The restraining order hearings next week, but Thomas Jenkins filed that rezoning. His brother-in-law's county commissioner Williams, so they've got pull. We're fighting on all fronts now, court, police, media, zoning. I spotted Thomas cruising past my house, his slow stare a predator's promise, and realized this wasn't just about my farm anymore. It was a stand against bullies banking on my surrender, a fight I'd never back down from. Next morning's notice jacked fines to $12,500, citing unapproved agricultural use on land zoned for it since before Maple Creek existed. And Sarah arrived, jaw tight as she spread county maps on my table, proving my farm's exemption, saying, this is nonsense. They're betting you'll cave. We sent a cease and desist letter, certified with my deed and zoning docs. But 2 days later, HOA landscape evaluators strolled through my tomatoes, one popping strawberries in his mouth, smirking, just documenting the nuisance. Until I chased them off, their gall caught on camera. Sleep vanished the next night. Officer Martinez knocked at dawn, sheepish. They're claiming your cameras invade privacy. But after showing him every angle stayed on my land, he nodded. Legal to me, watch yourself. This HOA's trouble. His quiet advice to document everything echoing as he left. By noon, my tomatoes drooped. Someone had sliced my irrigation pipes overnight. A quarter of my crops wilting in the heat, and security footage nailed Thomas at 2 a.m. Wire cutters in hand, laughing as he slashed my water lines. I called Alina, voice trembling. Your treasurer vandalized my irrigation. I've got video. I'm calling the police, and she cooed. Thomas was checking a leak, thank him for spotting it. Her lie so bold I nearly shouted, cutting pipes at 2 a.m., only for her to shrug, comply, and this stops. I spent the day patching pipes, hand watering what I could save, thousands in losses piling up as a certified letter hit. HOA's attorney threatened a lien for $7,800 in fines, warning of forced compliance via court if I didn't pay. Sarah, late-night calm, said, "They've overplayed, threatening legal action opens a door. Tomorrow we hit county records for their official boundaries, then surprise them where it hurts." Her excitement contagious as I pictured fighting back. I hammered up a sign at dusk, bright red letters screaming, Maple Creek HOA, $50 per item, $500 trespassing fee, cameras 24/7. And Sarah grinned when I showed her, confirming county maps proved my land's independence, saying, "They've been lying from the start. Let's make them pay." Dawn revealed my sign intact, my stand buzzing by noon with buyers from beyond Maple Creek. Drawn by the HOA tyrant tale, regular prices for all but HOA brass who'd face my steep fees for their thefts. Mrs. Rodriguez, a neighbor, whispered, "Eleanor." Gone too far. Half of us are scared silent, but we hate this. Her story of a felled treehouse chillingly familiar, and I knew the tide was shifting. Eleanor's next punch would find me ready, cameras rolling, and a community waking up. My roadside stand hummed with defiance, the red-lettered sign, Maple Creek HOA. $50 per item, $500 trespassing fee, cameras 24/7. A gauntlet thrown at Eleanor Whitfield's feet, and by noon, buyers swarmed, drawn from neighboring towns by whispers of an HOA gone rogue. Regular folks paid fair prices, $3 for tomatoes, $1 for peppers, while Mrs. Rodriguez and other Maple Creek residents slipped me tales of Eleanor's past overreach, like the Jacksons' treehouse acts during their vacation, her pattern of control snapping into focus. Around 2 p.m., Eleanor's black SUV screeched up, Thomas and two board members in tow, her face purpling as she read my sign, storming over to demand, "Remove this discriminatory trash. It's harassment and violates our bylaws." I stayed cool, replying, "My property, my rules. Unless you admit here with witnesses, you've got no jurisdiction." Her eyes flickering to the crowd, phones out, recording as uncertainty cracked her armor. Thomas jumped in, "You can't charge different prices, that's discrimination." But I pulled my folder, saying, "I can refuse service to trespassers and thieves. Want to see your midnight shopping spree on video?" And a customer piped up, "They've been stealing from you." Before Eleanor cut in, "This is a private HOA matter. He's in violation." I spread the county maps on my table. "These say my farm. Outside your boundaries, you've got zero authority." And Mrs. Rodriguez gasped, "They've lied to us all. The newsletter claimed he's breaking rules he's not even under." Eleanor's rage twisted as she hissed, "This isn't over. You'll regret crossing me." Dragging Thomas back to her SUV, a cheer rising from the crowd as they peeled out, my sales that day smashing records, support swelling from folks fed up with HOA tyranny. Notes from Maple Creek residents piled up, tips on Eleanor's other abuses. Hope blooming as I slept sounder than I had in weeks. My legal ground solid, cameras vigilant, the truth gaining traction. Dawn shattered that peace. My sign lay in splinters, wood smashed, paint scratched, 6 new violation notices plastered to my door, citing illegal commercial activity and discriminatory practices. Fines doubling to $15,600 overnight, but despair didn't take root. I downloaded the night's footage, Eleanor and Thomas at 3:17 a.m., hammers and crowbar in hand, their faces lit clear as day. I called Sarah. "They've handed us gold, criminal destruction," sending her the video, her voice crackling. "Trespassing again, we've got them." And I dialed Kelly Young, a local news reporter chasing HOA scandals, who arrived by noon gaping at the wreckage, saying, "This is the story we've been hunting, unchecked power begging for exposure." We were mid-interview beside the broken sign when Eleanor's SUV roared up, brakes slamming as she spotted the news van, shouting, "You're trespassing." Before clocking the camera, switching to a syrupy, "We're just maintaining standards." Kelly pounced, "Care to explain destroying property at 3 a.m. on video?" And I added, "Or stealing crops, cutting irrigation, lying about jurisdiction. County records say I'm not yours." Her face blanching as she fled without a word, tires screeching. Sarah called post-interview, "It's blowing up. 3 other farmers reached out with similar tales. The commissioner wants our evidence. And as neighbors like Mrs. Rodriguez rolled up to rebuild my sign, she said, "We're calling an emergency HOA meeting tonight. Most of us didn't know what she was doing." Hammering stakes with them, I saw this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a reckoning for every bully hiding behind a clipboard, and court loomed as our next battlefield. The news piece aired that night, Kelly Young's voice cutting through static. Maple Creek HOA caught on camera stealing crops, smashing signs, harassing a farmer outside their jurisdiction. And my phone buzzed with neighbors' cheers, Mrs. Rodriguez texting, "Meetings chaos, Aliner's losing it," as the community's blinders fell. Sarah called electric. "We're filing tomorrow criminal charges against Aliner and Thomas, civil suit against the HOA for harassment, fraud, theft, property damage." The commissioners spooked, demanding our footage. And I surveyed my battered farm, hope flickering as volunteers rebuilt my sign. Their hands dirty from saving my crops, a tide turning I hadn't dared dream of. Sleep came easier, bolstered by cameras and county maps, but dawn brought a $25,000 fine notice. Crazy claims of excessive vegetation on land zoned for it 50 years. Yet Sarah laughed when I read it. "They're desperate. We've got the official HOA boundaries now. They're toast." We pulled the records. My farm wasn't just exempt, it was miles from their legal reach, a lie they'd built their threats on. I hammered up a bigger sign. HOA members. $50 item, $500 trespassing, video evidence. And my stand thrived, buyers flocking to back the farmer fighting back, whispers of Aliner's treehouse takedown and other overreaches fueling their support. Officer Martinez dropped by, nodding at my setup. "Smart, keep documenting. DA, reviewing your theft report." His quiet respect a balm as I handed him a pepper, my fields healing with neighborly hands. Then Thomas rolled past, slow and starring, and Sarah's voice from our last call echoed. His brother-in-law, Commissioner Williams, might lean on zoning, but agricultural land's protected. They've got to prove real harm, not whining. So I emailed the zoning board again, digging for their ammo, my gut saying this wasn't over. Night fell and I woke to machinery. Rushing out in boxers, I found a county truck, 2 workers with clippers eyeing my beans, waving a hazard removal order from Williams' office, not Aliner's. A new front opening as I shouted, "This is private property, leave or I sue," filming their retreat, Sarah's number already ringing. "They're pivoting county." "In on it now," she growled. "Williams is covering for Thomas. I'll amend our suit conspiracy and push the restraining order hearing. You've got footage." I sent it, adding the order, and she said, "This is gold, they're tripping over themselves," as I staked orange survey markers, my boundary a neon dare. The zoning board replied. Public comment on rezoning was days away. Williams listed as reviewer, a stacked deck I'd have to topple with proof my farm wasn't hurting anyone. Kelly returned, filming the markers, asking, "They're rezoning to kill your farm." And I nodded. "They've stolen, vandalized, now they're rigging the system, my land, been agricultural forever," her pen flying as she vowed. "This airs tonight, county corruption's bigger than HOA bullies." Dusk brought Mrs. Rodriguez and 10 neighbors, tools in hand, saying, "Meeting voted Aliner out. Thomas too. We're here to help." Their sweat mixing with mine as we patched irrigation, a community waking up to fight beside me. Sarah's next call was fire. Restraining orders tomorrow. Suits filed, $50,000 damages, injunction against HOA and county meddling. Other farmers are joining us, class action brewing, and I stared at my fields, the war shifting from survival to justice. Thomas taunt, "Documents can be changed," rang hollow now. My cameras, maps, and neighbors' voices were rewriting the story, Aliner's empire cracking as the courthouse loomed, a reckoning for every trespasser who'd underestimated a farmer with dirt under his nails and a spine of steel. The restraining order hearing dawned tense, my truck rattling into the courthouse lot as neighbors waved. Farmers, Maple Creek residents, even strangers drawn by Kelly's latest exposé on county corruption tied to Aliner Whitfield's HOA. Inside, Sarah squared her shoulders, whispering, "We've got them boxed, footage, maps, witnesses," as Aliner and Thomas sat stiffly with their lawyer, smugness fraying when Judge Harriet Thompson entered, her gaze piercing as she said, "This escalated beyond fines, let's see the evidence." Sarah unleashed it. Video of Aliner stealing crops, Thomas slashing irrigation, both smashing my sign, county maps proving my farm's agricultural zoning outside HOA turf, and the clincher. The county trucks, hazard order from Commissioner Williams, Thomas' brother-in-law, caught on tape. Aliner's attorney, Mr. Davidson, sputtered, "The HOA acted to protect property values, negative impacts justify our reach." But Judge Thompson snapped, "Show me legal authority, not feelings," her patience thinning as he floundered. "Community standards extend influence," a claim she dismissed with a glare. My turn brought gasps. Neighbors like Mrs. Rodriguez testified to Aliner's lies in HOA newsletters. Officer Martinez confirmed my land's exemption, and Sarah played the clips, Aliner's smug, helping ourselves, and Thomas' wire-cutter laugh filling the room, the judge's face darkening as she asked, "Mrs. Whitfield, is that you stealing?" Aliner stammered. "Context, it was waste." But Thompson cut in. "Context is theft on camera, Mr. Jenkins cutting pipes at 2 a.m. Thomas' water leak excuse drew a scoff, with wire cutters laughing. Recess buzzed with HOA board members cornering Aliner, one hissing, "You said this was legal." And when we resumed, Angela Winters, ex-HOA secretary, dropped the bomb. Aliner targeted the farm after Thomas' condo development pitch failed. She promised us perks to force him out. The courtroom hummed, Davidson crying hearsay. But Thompson ruled, "Relevant financial motives change everything." Aliner's pale shock a crack in her armor as Sarah grinned beside me. The HOA's case unraveled. Their expert admitted no property value data, the county inspector debunked ordinance violations, and Judge Thompson leaned forward. "This isn't a dispute, it's harassment with criminal edges. I'll rule tomorrow 9 a.m. all present," her stare pinning Aliner and Thomas, who bolted as the gavel fell. Outside, reporters swarmed, "Think you'll win?" And I said, "Truth's out, that's enough." Kelly's camera rolling as neighbors clapped my back, sleep dodging me that night with the stakes so high. Morning brought a crowd, farmers, locals, news vans, and Thompson didn't flinch. "The plaintiff wins. HOA has no authority here. Their actions are trespass, vandalism, theft," ordering $43,500 in damages for crops, irrigation, distress, and fees, plus a permanent injunction barring HOA entry without my say-so. Aliner slumped, Thomas stared down, and the judge added, "Criminal aspects, vandalism, theft, conspiracy go to the DA. HOA fraud, under review," a hammer blow to their schemes. Reporters pounced, "How's it feel?" And I said, "It's about saving farmland, not winning." As Angela approached later, nervous, Aliner and Thomas resigned, emergency meeting forced them out, the board wants amends. Skeptical, I nodded, but when interim president Mr. Ramirez offered a written apology and a community garden deal, labor for produce with permission, I saw a shift, mulling it as I watered my recovering beans. Dusk brought Aliner herself, no pomp, saying, "I'm selling, moving. Thomas promised me a commission. I was desperate." Her apology raw but late, my fine piece elsewhere. All I could muster. The fight's cost etched in my fields, yet a strange peace settling as her taillights faded, justice blooming where her threats once grew. Aliner Whitfield's taillights vanished into the dusk, her apology echoing as I stood by my recovering tomato plants, the courthouse victory still fresh, $43, $500 in damages, an injunction, criminal referrals. But the fight's scars lingered in trampled rows and sleepless nights. Mr. Ramirez's garden proposal nagged at me, Maple Creek residents volunteering labor for a share of produce, a partnership born from the HOA's wreckage. And though skepticism gnawed, my aging knees whispered it might ease the load, so I told him, "I'll think it on it," watering my fields as the idea took root. The district attorney called next day. Aliner and Thomas face charges, mischief, theft. Most board members are flipping. Evidence is tight. A legal net closing as Angela's words replayed. Residents loved your farm nearby. We didn't know her plan, hinting the community might heal where Aliner had torn it apart. I posted a sign at week's end. Community garden lessons, Saturdays 9 a.m., all welcome. Half expecting a trickle, but 25 showed, Ramirez leading families with eager kids, a teenage boy asking, "Where do we start?" As I handed him a seedling, stunned by the turnout. Summer unfurled and my farm transformed. Neighbors who'd once griped brought lemonade to work parties. Kids who'd never seen a seed sprout now boasted pumpkin patches. The roadside stand a buzzing hub where Mrs. Rodriguez swapped zucchini bread for stories of Alina's reign. Her "We're with you," a balm to old wounds. Ramirez approached one evening, corn harvest in full swing, handing me a document. HOA voted unanimously. A permanent easement in our bylaws locking your farm's agricultural rights. No future board can touch it. And I read it, throat tight, the paper a shield forged from conflict, proof my land was safe for good. The zoning battle faded too, public comment buried Thomas, rezoning bid under farmer outcry and Kelly's relentless coverage. Commissioner Williams backpedaling as Sarah crowed. "They're done, agricultural protections held, your evidence tipped it." My cameras stayed up, but the trespassers didn't return, the county truck a memory as volunteers weeded beside me, their laughter a new crop I hadn't planted. Alina's ghost lingered in whispers. Her house sold, charges pending, Thomas, condo dreams dust. But the farm thrived, its heartbeat stronger with every shared harvest. Neighbors learning to trellis beans while I learned their names, a community stitching itself whole. I'd sit on my porch at dusk, county maps and that easement beside me, marveling how a war over vegetables birthed something bigger. Folks who'd feared her now dug in my dirt, kids who'd eyed my fields warily now raced through them, the stand. HOA, $50, sign a relic of defiance turned to pride. Sarah dropped by, grinning. "Class actions growing, other farmers suing HOAs. You started a wave." And I nodded. The fight's reach rippling beyond my 5 acres, a quiet thrill in knowing bullies elsewhere might think twice now, my footage their warning shot. The first frost edged in, and I bundled by the stand, tallying a season of wins. Not just surviving Alina's onslaught, but gaining allies who saw what I'd always known. Growing food binds people tighter than rules ever could. Ramirez's daughter tugged my sleeve, showing off her first carrot, and I thought of Alina's eyesore, Jab, now Maple Creek's treasure, a farm that stood because I'd fought and they'd joined me. The easement crinkled in my pocket, a promise etched in law, but the real victory was the chatter around me. Neighbors planning next year's plots, their roots sinking into my soil, a harvest of trust I'd never expected to reap.